Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Jonathan Todd, Vice Chair of the Transportation and Logistics Practice Group at Benesch Law. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Brittany. Happy to.
I think the only way to characterize what we've been dealing with, what we've been sitting and witnessing between Tuesday at midnight to now is tariff whiplash. So I want to talk about where we sit now, what happened from Tuesday until Friday morning, and then if you could make some sense of it. So first, on Tuesday, starting at midnight, President Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada officially went into effect. And the trade war between the United States and China was escalated with additional tariffs slapped on Chinese imports. Canada and China immediately retaliated with their own set of tariffs. Mexico did say, we will respond and we will announce that response over the weekend. Then on Thursday, President Trump announced that he was pausing tariffs for 1 month on any good that falls under the USMCA, which we know is a trade agreement. What do you think about what has been going on with tariffs since Tuesday to now?
That's right. So it's a challenging business environment. I think that's the headline story, and everyone understands that, everyone with U.S. business interests. If we go back a month prior, remember that this was announced, and then there was already a month pause. And so what went into effect earlier this week was after that original pause, everyone understood it was happening, it rolled out. What we heard after that was kind of a rolling call of industry, particularly the auto industry, raising concerns with the administration. And we began to hear remarks out of administration representatives that there could be some room for a deal yet again. That deal ultimately happened, apparently. The president announced on Truth Social that this was a 1 month pause to bring us into April. But the actual official documents that came out of the White House are interesting because first, they make it clear that the automotive industry was at the heart of concern over the impact from the tariffs, particularly on the North American supply chain. Remember, we've spent 30 years building out investments in automotive and in other supply chains across Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And so it makes sense that that was kind of on the leading edge of concern. But what came out of the White House was an indication that this applies to, as you said, all goods that would otherwise enter under the USMCA agreement, which is the renegotiated NAFTA agreement. It was a hallmark of the Trump 45 administration. So as it stands today, goods that would have otherwise received duty-free entry into the United States will again receive duty-free entry into the United States. It remains to be seen, this 1 month pause concept, although that was said on Truth Social, that is not said in the official documents outside of the White House. And so the timing, I think, still remains kind of up in the air, which is some more uncertainty. But the good news is, at least as of this moment, those calls from industry apparently were effective, and North American trade, at least from a U.S. perspective, is right now protected.
I've heard you use the word challenging, a lot of uncertainty. The erratic nature of these tariffs, I want you to talk about how specifically it's impacting the supply chain right now, because as we know, Canada and Mexico are some of our biggest trade partners.
That's right. So the top three trading partners right now are Canada, Mexico, and China. And this is a change. If you go back just a short number of years, China was our largest trading partner. So what that tells you is what the Trump administration did in the 45 administration did have the effect of decoupling from China, nearshoring, friendshoring, all of these concepts that we've heard about in business for the last couple of years. What it also tells you, though, is that we don't have any hesitation as a country using our leverage against our largest trading partners. The challenge is that domestic U.S. business, which is a consumer-driven economy, relies in large part on goods from these countries. And we also export a fair number of goods to these countries. So I think the immediate impact of that was swift. It was challenging for business. And the number one thing that I'm telling the clients that I work with at our law firm is that we need to prepare for uncertainty. You can't be reactionary, but you do need to be strategic. And so there are lots of things you can do, but the number one thing in my mind is to think about your trading relationships in those countries. How are we going to work through a dramatic change in cost? Who is going to bear that cost? How are we going to communicate with each other, private company to private company, as these things roll out? Because they're happening very, very quickly. Someone has to pay for these. It's usually the US importer, but then maybe they can negotiate with suppliers. Maybe they can pass it on to US customers, or maybe they cannot. It depends on the market. But that basic framework of, if we accept that there may be dramatic, swift, higher costs, how are we going to internalize it? That's the hard nut to crack. And that's where I'm bringing focus to my clients so we can find quick solutions to move in this environment.
And your clients, I can imagine, certainly need quick solutions because this is only a 1-month pause. And is that a lot of time? What does that time frame look like? Is that enough time to really think about your trading relationships? 30 days?
It's enough time to maybe renegotiate the roadmap, like I'm describing, the roadmap of how, if things happen quickly, how can we accommodate those? It is in no way enough time to change up your timeline. And here's an example. We've seen this movie before. In 2018, the Trump 45 administration rolled out its Section 301 duties on goods from China. When that happened, I spoke with many, many people who immediately went on sourcing tours through Southeast Asia, through Canada, through Mexico, even through Europe, to try and find alternate suppliers from China. And everyone told me at the time, this is a 5-year endeavor. It will take probably around 5 years to really move supply chains, move capacity, move production. And if you move forward 5 years, that's around 2023. And this was when news was all abuzz about nearshoring and friendshoring, and we're decoupling from China and all of these things. So that's a 5-year timeline playing out, right? If you think about the time it would take to make serious investments in the United States, because the United States is the one safe territory to source from now, it would take at least those 5 years. Some industries may be able to move more quickly. They may be able to retool. They may be able to expand. But the idea that you really need to move significant manufacturing capacity to the United States and hire the labor to do that and begin that production, that's a years-long timeline. On a long enough timeline, it's possible. But then we get to something that the president mentioned on his address to Congress this week. There will be some pain. And I think even the administration understands that today. The open question for business and for every consumer is, what does that pain look like? How quickly does it come? And what will the effects of that be?
And it seems like that the president is turning tariffs on like a spigot, on and off, depending on his negotiating and how he perceives that is going well. So when you're talking about this pain, when the tariff spigot is temporarily turned off, are business leaders, is the everyday American feeling that pain, or is it just halted for 30 days?
Well, every supply chain is different. So there will be some companies that have already advanced inventories in the United States, or they have enough inventories that they can go for a period of time without needing to rely on negotiations with suppliers or change price with consumers. On the other hand, the environment is so chaotic, it is time to determine how we will do that. And I promise that most sophisticated businesses and even smaller suppliers are doing that right now. But there will be some that need to get in front of this, right? And so it's not unheard of. We're seeing some of it where prices are rising now, or even volumes. Maybe a supplier can only commit to smaller volumes, or a buyer needs far fewer volumes because, frankly, they can't accommodate the cash flow to buy whatever raw materials or inputs they would otherwise buy. That sort of groundwork is happening now. The big question that no one can really answer is, on a national macro scale, at what point do we see the pain for the consumer and for business at large? There's not a good answer for that now. Some in the administration are signaling that the experience of 2018 and 2019 suggests that these things can happen without any appreciable pain. Although, again, the president mentioned pain in his address to Congress, and I think that the ability to pick up the slack on cost, like we saw in 2018, is probably strained beyond what we experienced then.
The president has said that he is using tariffs as a negotiating tactic. That's what those around him have said. They went into effect because he's not happy with immigration as well as fentanyl. They're now paused, but I am curious because People have said they're chaotic in nature. People have said this is a tax on the consumer. When you're talking to business owners in America, businesses that are affected by this, what are they saying? Are they happy about the pause? Are they just temporarily relieved? What does that look like?
I think that there's an expectation that this is happening and there's a degree of kind of lack of control here, which is realistic. I think the realistic position is to accept the possibility that we will have price volatility, we will have volume volatility in the future, and we need to prepare for that. That's not being reactionary, that's just making a plan like a good business. Early on, after the election, I had a number of clients who were exploring, legislative options, lobbying options. Apparently, the auto industry, caught the president's ear at the right time, and that was effective for resolving the challenge this week. The difficulty with those sorts of mechanisms is that the president's reliance on law is one where he does have the authority to declare national emergencies. And if he does so, if those are legitimate, if he follows, the rule of the law, then he can, in general, do much of what he's doing. Congress over the years has given the president that authority. There probably will be lawsuits. There are still lawsuits pending from what the president did in his 45 administration. And the long story short there is that even if folks did want to challenge, if folks were seriously concerned and they wanted to find some other remedy for this, the reality is that you continue to pay the duties until there is a court judgment to the contrary. And so it doesn't provide any immediate relief to the tariffs, at least the way most of these play out, and the way, frankly, that those lawsuits from 2018 and 2019 era played out. Those are still pending today. And for those years since then, importers who are paying those 301 duties on China are still paying those 301 duties on China, even while they fight what the president did in his first term.
The market, when President Trump announced the tariffs and when they went into effect, reacted very negatively. Basically, the market was screaming at the White House, we don't like the tariffs. U.S. automakers told the White House, we don't like these tariffs. You're killing our business here. I am curious, you're the expert in this space, especially when it comes to supply chains. What do you think is missing from the national and really international conversation when it comes to tariffs?
The thing that I keep thinking is that we have 30 years of investment in USMCA, and we have a little less than that if you think about the forming of the global trading systems that exist today, but approximately 30 years. There's so much investment. There's so much traffic around the world. Supply chains are truly global now. My background is supply chain management. I followed it for all of my career. And I think that the degree of interconnectivity for global markets and for US-based businesses is something that everyone needs to keep top of mind. This isn't just about the United States, even with the United States, our America First rather trade policy. It's not just about us in the sense that a lot of domestic US businesses that bring money back to the US and still employ people in the US, they do have sales overseas. And this gets right back to the reciprocal piece of this. Trading relationships are relationships like any other relationship. We've already seen that Canada is pulling, for example, US liquor off their shelves. We were expecting other retaliation potentially out of Mexico, and China has announced their own retaliatory measures. These things are happening in real time. The retaliations are being thoughtful. Another thing to overlay is in a month, we will have a report out of the administration on what the president refers to as reciprocal tariffs, which could lead to increased cost pressure and, frankly, the potential for additional retaliation from other countries around the world. And so I think that the long story short is that even though we have an America First trade policy, and even though America voted for the president, there is still the need to recognize that at least right now, we have a very interconnected global economy. And on a long enough timeline, perhaps that can change. I think that that's within the realm of reason. The real question is that pain question. The real question is, as these relationships maybe fall apart or are reformed, in what ways will Americans feel the pain of that before they start to feel the reward? And that's a crystal ball question that I don't think anyone at this time can answer.
Based on your work with people in industries who are affected by these tariffs, Do they think that this trade policy really is America first? Because based on what you're saying, they're feeling negative impacts boomerang back at them when it comes to these tariffs.
I think that there's an understanding that, there has been consternation across the country, across, the voters, that, we have lost the manufacturing base in the United States, and that, there is some recognition of value to bring that back. I think that most people recognize, the need to protect America in all ways. I think that's fair. The challenge is how we get there. And one of the points of dialogue that you're hearing across business leaders and pundits is whether and how tariffs are part of the solution. They very well may be part of the solution. They're an effective economic tool at driving behavior. That's really at the core of what the president is doing. And going back to his prior administration, it is true that China, as the number one trading partner and as for some companies, the sole source of their foreign imports, has diminished. China is now the third largest trading partner for the US instead of the first. And I have many, many clients who used to essentially sole source product from China, where today they'll have maybe a dozen international suppliers in Asia, in North America, and in Europe. And in that way, they've created supplier diversity, and they've been able to mitigate the concentration risk of relying solely on China. If you look at that in a nutshell, that's in a way a success, that in a way achieved exactly what the president sought to achieve in his first administration. The difference now is that we're talking about that policy on a global scale and with our not only trading partners, but our neighbors. And I think the speed of this and the extremity of it has caused a lot of concern among domestic business. But the idea that tariffs are in no way a solution to getting the American workforce and the American industrial base and American companies where people would like them to be, I don't think that's entirely out of the picture. It's a question of when, where, why, and how.
Jonathan, I think that there's a lot that remains to be seen. We're obviously looking at that big April 2nd date. We're looking at when the pause gets lifted. But until then, I hope you can come back on and break it down with us and see the developments as they come to fruition. Jonathan, Todd, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Brittany.